Hello and welcome to the sixth episode of the Anti-Professional Podcast. I'm your host, Chuck Copenspire, owner of Identity Pending. If you need any digital marketing services related to being found by your ideal customers online, please go to www.identitypending.com to explore what we can do for you. In today's episode, I am talking with one of my coaches, Nikki, who is running a coaching container right now called The Business of Being Yourself, which I'm enjoying quite a lot. And in this episode, we explore identity, expression, cultural factors about how we show up in life. We talk about existential kink and all kinds of other stuff. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope you have a great day. All right, humans, welcome to the sixth episode of the Anti-Professional Podcast. 6 is my lucky number, so I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm here with Nikki Vergakes, the dark feminine astro witch, also my coach, mutual Instagram coach for many years, plugging along alongside each other. And I would love to share a poem that I wrote that was inspired by you. It goes, Nikki the witch, the flow and the hitch, juggling reality, flipping the switch. Nothing is real and nothing is wrong. Life is a spell, a story, a song. Things we can't see, no more than we dare. Question the void and find something there. All is mutable, all is creation. All is entropy, sorrow and elation. A whole picture, every hue, different shades, grades of value. How do we value our lives, our time, our spirit, our vibes? How do we monetize being alive and being in tune with our truth while adjusting our worldview and making room for everyone at the table? May we find stable ground amongst the chaos. May we find good friends that we can count on. May we nurture our grief, our loss, and our pain while we're finding the way to wherever we're headed. Welcome, Nikki. Let's get started. I come to you bold and open-hearted. This conversation will be brazen and bold and wake up the ones who don't do what they're told. And that's my opening spell for you.
Wow. Can you send that to me?
Yeah, I will, for sure.
Because I'm in the middle of, I'll introduce myself, but like you said, but I'm in the middle of refinding my words for my brand. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to use a lot. I'm not like Steele, but wow. Please, yeah.
I'm open source. Yeah. You can take whatever you want. But yeah, with that, I'll let you, put into your own words. Who are you and what do you stand for?
Okay. Yes. Wow. I love that so much. Thank you for that poem. So I am Nikki. I am a Boston-based queer life and business coach and astrologer and hypnotherapist. And the lens that I do a lot of my work is through shadow work, and like in that poem of like facing the void. Let's face it. It feels very gentle because of it's my approach, but it also like you're facing stuff and you might not even kind of realize that you're doing it, and then you're like, wow, here I am. And then I like using the subconscious techniques because it really like thought work can go up to a point and it really helps bridge that gap of like changing your behavior. And I stand, and so this is all like all for authenticity. I'm all for, in a world that tells us to be in a certain way and do certain things, especially just like the more and more that at least the world in the US is going on the path it's going on. It's just more and more of a beautiful and brave act to be yourself, the bravery of being yourself, which is the course that they're in. And also as capitalism is just crumbling around us, like you said, monetizing being alive, how can we use that to provide value to others and sustain the life that we want to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the puzzle for especially us multi-hyphenates out there, however you want to refer to us. But yeah, those of us who are, I don't know about you, but I very much struggle with what are you? What do you do? Like, I feel like I have to change my job description like every 6 weeks at least, which is, part of, I guess, what I do here. But yeah, giving myself permission to be that person, I think has been a very long process. And I think that's true for a lot of people. Something that I've been wanting to talk to you about, and came up actually during our last coaching call together. I'm really into shadow work as well, because we've talked about it a bit. And I love, like I learned a lot through like the Jungian writings or even interpretations of Jungian work, and then got more into the spiritual side of it, really getting into like Lilith and like the whole like feminine demon trope thing, which is all very interesting to me. But there was one person I worked with or spoke with, who is sort of a non-dualist, animist, art priest or something. I don't exactly know how to categorize this human, but they brought up the point to me that the term shadow work has inherent like racism built into it. And so they challenged me to come up with different language. So I've been using the words integration work. And I looked into it, and I think this person is the only person who's really brought that into the collective consciousness. And I was really affected by it years ago, but I realized I thought it was more mainstream. I thought that was a bigger conversation. And so I was curious to get your take on like the concept of shadow work, the concept of dark and light magic, and like how the like dark and light can sort of, add to, just like general dark, bad, light, good conversations, and like what your orientation is around that.
Oh yeah. I love that question. I'm very curious, as I didn't know about any of those racist connotations, so would definitely like to look more into that, because part of, ever since I kind of learned, I'm not certified in it, but learned about internal family systems and IFS, which is, if people aren't familiar, of like, if people know about parts work, which is like looking at the different parts of ourselves, but the IFS framework is that a lot is that all of these parts of ourselves have their own consciousness, their own desires and motivations and goals. They all kind of like make up the self. But it's kind of so that like really helped inform my approach of basically like I really, even though the terms like shadow, even when I talk about shadow work, I use the terms of like, these are parts of yourself that you are not maybe proud of, or that you have some trouble accepting, but I try to never use the language or talk about it of like, these are inherently the bad parts of you, because I can't tell somebody, well, I don't even believe that there are like, bad parts. No bad parts is a huge. So even though like it's kind of like a way of categorizing them, to really based on like how as a society we're used to looking at those things. And ideally, would love to move towards more of the language of like, all of these parts are neutral, and like integrating just all of the parts of ourselves. So even though it's a jealousy part, that is just, sometimes we feel jealous. It is a lot of it goes hand in hand. Like, that's why I also say I like to talk about like radical acceptance and radical self-acceptance as well. Radical acceptance of yourself, and also like situations. And that kind of goes hand in hand of it too, of like, and also the like, many things are true at once. And so just because you have a part of yourself that you feel really good about, and then a part of yourself that you might not, they don't cancel each other out. And also that other part of yourself that could be identified, quote unquote, as the shadow. And again, as a practitioner, I would never identify someone else's part as the shadow. It's whatever they say. then that's an opportunity. There's so much there. It's really like, these are opportunities. These are huge opportunities for like learning about ourselves, and because it's often the things that we eventually move into like embracing and becoming are from things that we once wanted to separate ourselves from.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, I mean, speaking for myself, even like queerness, like I was raised very conservative Christian, and like the first time I had like a queer dream, I like stuffed it away and was like, bah, 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 you know, and like there was so much about myself that I was like, no, you know. And I was like very judgmental about other people who were like sex positive and like, you know, just I was judgy about so many things because I was raised in a very judgmental space where, you know, I was judged, we judged other people, and just so many things weren't allowed. And I think it has been interesting to grow into accepting how much of the things that I was judgmental about as a young person are actually really delightful and, you know, something that I want to destigmatize. Um, and yeah, just to go back to sort of the dark and light thing, I think I have been playing a lot with like non-dualism in the last couple of years as part of like my Buddhist practice, and generally, I think I used to have a very binary concept of like, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, and I almost think for some of us on the autism spectrum, that sort of like extreme filing can be part of it. And so I think a non-dualism practice has been really helpful for that aspect of myself. But I don't know. I'm still wrestling with like I see you claim dark in your handle, and like, you know, you bring a lot of like energy and like pride, and not, you know, not, I don't want to use pride in the negative way, but like you're changing the conversation around these things that are supposed to be bad. But I just wonder how long it will take our culture to get to like a non-binary space around whether or not things are good or bad, or if we'll ever get there.
Yeah, me too. I think of, yeah, because I often, it's just often have to check myself on um my bubble, being in this bubble, especially like you know, separating from people who we grew up around that are toxic, and then moving or whatever it is, in any way surrounding ourselves with like-minded people, and also like-minded in a way that also still challenges us on things, and then also if you're being self-employed, that adds a whole other thing of it too, because you're physically so often, yeah, I'll have to catch myself and be like, oh yeah, I'm not everybody. You just go out into the world and it's like, oh, a majority of people don't think this way. Of all that we were saying. And so so I also, then I try to put myself or think of myself during the phases of how I got here thinking this way, and what were the steps that in order to get to thinking like this, what were the steps that needed to happen, of, you know, what is kind of reverse engineering it, what is first, what would, in order to get to just this non-binary thinking, what needs to, if you're somebody who needs to like, who judges people and who like puts things in boxes, I think a lot of it is, which is why I'm doing the work I do. Like, my mission with doing the work I do is to not only do that, to encourage others to do that, but then also they go and encourage others to do it too. Of it's shame. It's a lot of shame work. Shame is like a huge, because that's why people project onto other people, which judgment is projection. So Brene Brown, keep doing the work she's doing, and then also everyone else who's talking about shame. shame and also like control. I think this is definitely all connected into like organized religion and government and things. People in power weaponize people's shame, and to keep them in control. And a lot of times it's tied in like with your livelihood as well.
Well, and I'm sure you see so much in the coaching space, at least when I was learning how to market my coaching, so much of it was like, make them insecure, like make them believe you're the only one who can do it, fake scarcity, fake urgency, all this stuff of like, make them buy from a scared place. And like, they say that so openly without, I feel like without any self-awareness. Like I've read almost all the ClickFunnels books. Bless Russell Brunson for bringing funnels into the mainstream, but so many problematic things in his books. Like he talks about like, if you really want to learn about how to have a viral marketing campaign, you should study Hitler. And I'm like, bro, find a new example. Like there's no there's no like second edition of this book. You didn't think you needed to update that a little bit? Okay. Like he's in Idaho. I grew up in Idaho. I know about Idaho. It's just like, maybe find a different example. So like I found that like there's so much, like encouraging manipulation in the space without a lot of self-awareness or without any like ethical lens that was really challenging for me. And I'm curious like what your orientation has been around that as a person who is a coach, has coached. I'm sure you have been coached. Like have you run into people who've coached you and tried to convince you to do things that made you feel like uncomfortable on like a soul level, I guess?
Yeah, and I think about, I actually created, I had a coach before I officially had a business. I like started with a business coach to build my business, which is a lot of, when it comes to business coaching, what I do with people. But so I have, so yeah, it's an interesting experience because it was not like they were straight up saying those things, but they basically were. It was a one-on-one, and they were basically regurgitating just the structure of like, okay, so when I made my first offer, or I guess my first coaching offer, because I had put out a few social media management packages before that, it was very much like, okay, you're going to put out a freebie, and leading up to that freebie, we're going to put out content based on what we want people to think so that they'll be ready to get that freebie. And then the freebie is going to have a funnel that, ups, or then I had a freebie and then I had a challenge. And now part of it was definitely like, I have a great grasp and lay of the land on funnels and how to run a challenge and everything. And I have marketing experience and a master's in strategic communication, and like there's a thin line, but there is a lot of, valid, like, in order to help people make a buying, now I kind of reframe it as that, help people make a buying decision. This information presented to them in a certain way is best, is you want to get that to them before, to help them make the buying decision. But when it came to, so I was glad to like have that structure, but it was definitely, when it came to selling in the DMs, there was very much like a structure that's where it got a little seedy for me. And the thing is yeah, people that now, like, me and like a lot of people that I've talked to have like been in some sort of course like that, and then after a while realizing that they didn't feel so good, but maybe at first didn't realize why, and feel so good about it, and it was like not working for them and it was hard for them, then they kind of have a moment where they're reflecting and also maybe seeing or talking to people or seeing content online about like, oh, this is why this is problematic, and like fake urgency and FOMO. FOMO was definitely one of those things where I look back on and I'm like, wow, we were just like saying the quiet part out loud there, like, or that they were really just saying that. Some of my, like I would be having a conversation with somebody about maybe getting into coaching or social media, or into my coaching or social media or something. And I would be talking with that coach, and I would be like, and they would be telling me like things I could say, and none of them sat right. But I thought at the time, and this was like 2019, I feel like we've had so many conversations in the space since then, but I just thought it was a me problem. It was like a mindset, George. That's what she said to me. And she was just working with, what she knew at the time. But yeah, like that it was a mindset thing, or that like quote unquote mindset thing, or that like, yeah, it was my insecurity. Like, oh, I wasn't cut out for this. I didn't realize that it went against my morals and ethics. And she like sent me some resources of like her friend's masterclass that like of them objection handling, quote unquote. Of like, do you like basically like, do you want this enough? And I was trying to like, stuff like that. And like, I was trying to imagine myself saying that to someone, and it just like, for me, I thought it was insecurity, but it really was just like, no,
that's just not aligned. It's like what your entire message and brand is like doesn't align with that. And it's like, it's not part of a good customer experience if like you're supposed to be, like guiding them to like the safety of accepting themselves, and then you're like undermining their undermining there's so much about like I keep making dating analogies and like sales trainings. I'm like, you're telling me to keep pressing after they say no. I don't do that in any other area of my life, and I will not do that in a sales relationship, because that's not a respectful relationship to begin with. Like, I'm going to respect them, and then when they're ready, they'll come to me. But if anyone who's forced me into a sale in that way, because it's happened a few times, I don't like them or trust them after that interaction. I feel a little icky. I feel a little trespassed upon. In the same way that I would after a bad date. And so I just don't think it's a good practice personally.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it like affects how, because, it affects how that customer or that client shows up in your container or in your course. So often if a sale is made that kind of way, and then people turn around and talk about how their client is not quote unquote showing up for the container, and it's likely because they feel mistreated and trespassed upon, or they feel resentment because they kind of didn't want to be there in the first place. Like coaching is a very, it's not, you don't just join a coaching container lightly. It has to be something that you really want to do, and that is really aligned. And then I think we see a lot of people join coaching containers like willy-nilly because of that, which is like their own decision. But yeah, there's definitely like a culture like when I was getting started of like how many coaches you have or courses that you're in is like street cred in a way, because in a way that shows that you can invest in all of these things, which is just not a real reason to join a course or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. And I think, being a coach, I tend to follow a lot of other coaches, and then I get kind of whipped up in sometimes they're like FOMO marketing or whatever. And I think I've gotten better at like regulating and noticing when that's happening, versus like actually being genuinely excited to join a container. And I would say 90% of the time, I end up really making great connections with the other people who feel called to that container, which is why I will usually invest. I'll be like, who are the other folks who would be here? And that will be what usually pushes me into that space. Um, there was something I was going to say about values and stuff, but fell out of my brain. So I'm sure it'll come back. The to kind of bring the concept or the conversation back to the concept of like professionalism, you had mentioned that you know have experience kind of in the corporate realm and then shifting out of it. So I'd love to know what your sort of storyline has been with the concept of professionalism and like showing up for it or rejecting it, and like how you feel about it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah, which is great. Yeah. So yeah, kind of my history with it. Yeah. So yeah, I've always, because there's definitely been times where it's definitely always been something like professionalism in a traditional way, that just like many things in life, that I've tried to fit myself. It definitely was, yeah, tried to like fit myself into
Mm-hmm.
in or in tried to, yeah, basically like, yeah, had many experiences where I feel like I had to change myself to fit in. Um, and so, yeah, I had, yeah, so I studied public relations, and I was in like the corporate PR and marketing world, and had a few internships in that space. Those internships were mostly casual environments. And then my first job was actually great. Really, truly was really great. It was there were some moments like it was a kind of a casual office environment. And my boss they were very understanding. And then our clients would be a little more professional sometimes. So one of my first like moments of like, oh, woo, with that was I my Twitter was kind of a place, um I where I would where that was kind of at odds, where like when I wanted to be corporate and I had to be corporate, I would, but also I I should have just, or I didn't want to. Clearly, I wanted to rebel, but I was like, oh, I should just make a separate personal one. But I still wanted to like show my personality, and like I definitely just never felt like my actual personality could fit into that world. But there was also I must have known deep down that I want, like, I just always wanted. I think I didn't make a separate one because I just wanted to, like, I was like, why does it have to be this way? But I don't even really remember what I would be tweeting. I was very mindful, but it was still like, I mostly like tweet about music or something, but like, but if I went to conferences, I would live tweet. And also as a PR person, a lot of journalists are on Twitter, so I would sometimes retweet like industry stuff and like follow journalists, but I never fully felt right just totally like transferring my Twitter presence to be like corporate like that. So then but because Twitter was such a thing with like PR and journalists, I had it in my like email signature at my job. And I sent an email to one of our clients, and then and this was like a very difficult client, so that like, but so I guess she emailed my boss and was like, I looked on the person on our account's Twitter, and it was like unprofessional. And then my boss like was like, he was fine, he was chill, he was like, yeah, she said this, like, I think it's mostly fine, but like either take it out of your bio or something. Not your bio, but your signature. So that was one of the first confronting moments. And then when I moved to Rhode Island, I worked at a nonprofit that was like a very corporate. It was way more corporate than that agency I was at. It was like it was a lot of like just older, not to like, it was like a lot of like people that were like, they made it a point. They like did not let me forget that I was young. And there were like little things, like everyone was like afraid of the CEO. It was just a very weird culture. And there were like little things like, oh, I made mashed potatoes from scratch for this Christmas. And one of the people were like, you don't do that every year? Like, and just, I never knew like, and there's like so much wrapped up in that, where like my family is kind of a mess, and like we usually don't even have time to like to think about like stuff like that. And yeah, I just always felt judged no matter what there. So anyway, lot to unpack there. So when I started my business, my brand, I think a lot of me talking about embracing all of this stuff and authenticity and is in partly, if this is my true self, but also like not a rebellion, but like being who I've always wanted to be, for that version of myself that could not be this way. And it's been like a big ego working with the ego, because there was like a transition, but from when I started my business, I was like, is this gonna be like, especially if I was gonna be a social media manager, which quickly I realized I didn't want that. Am I going to be professional? Am I going to be not am I going to be quote unquote professional in the way that I've always learned? And am I not going to be? And then if you just go through my feed, like you can just see slowly like the transition. And like, and then in one of my latest photo shoots, I wore like a blazer, like with a corset top, and just kind of like embracing that. And yeah, I'm not going on this path anymore, but I've had a few like corporate job interviews again in the last couple months. And it's almost like, again, getting out of your little bubble, like, oh yeah. And just the way that like, cause I'm like, I am honest about like having a coaching business. And just the way that people like, oh yeah, some of our people have side hustles, and how are you going to manage your time? And just the way that they talk about it, like minimizing it.
Interesting. And yeah, it's funny because I sometimes do that too, where I'll be like, I'll just apply for a couple corporate jobs this month, like if I get like scared in the middle of the night, sometimes I'll be like, just get on LinkedIn, throw a few of them out there. But yeah, it's interesting to hear about like that bubble. Yeah, because I think especially for those of us who are like embroiled in this like astrology and like queer culture and like anti-capitalism and all that stuff, sometimes I'll show up at like a regular networking event and I'll be like, you didn't expect, I always joke like they didn't expect me, but I'm here. Because I love going to like button up networking events and like showing up in like purple hair and weird stuff, and I always end up finding the secret weirdos. I've always joked that, or I've been joking that since I moved to the East Coast I have to flag super hard, because anybody weird or queer here is super stealth. Like it's really hard to find them, but they always find me, so that's kind of been my strategy.
I live in Boston, everyone's in a sweat in hoodies.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the West Coast and East Coast are very different, but I'm enjoying the East Coast so far. I remember the thing I wanted to circle back to, and it ties into a bit of what you just said. I think we talked about Carolyn Elliott's work with existential kink. Have you and I discussed that?
Oh yeah, you brought that up in our call. Yeah.
I really like thinking about that framework for the parts of ourselves we're ashamed of, but that we secretly indulge in anyway, in like sideways ways. And I always, talk about how, as part of my integration work, I've accepted that I'm like a controlling person. I can be a very cruel person. Like I have a lot of sides of myself that have, like destructive desires and all of that. And being able to reckon with that and find the containers like BDSM where it's appropriate to express that are really helpful, because before that they would come out in places like work or in my intimate relationships where I couldn't articulate what I needed. And I feel like so much of what we see in the corporate space is about that erotic desire for control, that erotic desire for power. And there's just so much like pretending that it's not there. And I think that's part of why I don't enjoy it. Is like, if we could all consciously reckon with the fact that you want to step on my face for fun, like, okay, let's talk about that. Maybe we can work through our differences. But if you're just going to keep putting me down in front of people because you don't respect me, but we'll never have an actual conversation about that, it's just like, I can't do duplicity. I'd rather just know that you're a sadist and like, interact with you as a sadist. You know what I mean? But I feel like, again, talking about bubbles, I've been in the BDSM education world for 8 years. I started as the shame destroyer, as you know, like so much of what I did was around gender and sexuality and talking about the things we're not supposed to talk about. But I forget, one, that not everyone has the same language. As you talked about, like the stepping stones to get where we are, and not everyone has the desire, I think, to get that kind of clarity. And I think it's hard for me sometimes because I feel like we could really speed up some of the healing that we need to do as an entire planet if we could reckon with our erotic truth and desire and primal desires. And I'm curious if that does that come up in your work with people? Some of those like existential kink things where it's like, I think you actually really want this, and do you want to like talk about that?
Yeah, I and that just, is what you just said of like, that some people don't have the desire. I like am figuring out if that is true, because if like if I feel like that's true to me, like, not about me, but like about other people, because if I wanted to make a wild claim, I would be like, I don't think that some people don't have the desire. They're just so repressed. Because how many times it's like people who run, I'm like, this is a dark example and trigger warning, conversion camps. Like, people that run those camps are gay, like, right. Like that. But so much of what I like, it happens in my business coaching specifically, but also like just life coaching. People basically, like, a lot of times people come in, or I've had enough of these experiences when I was just kind of like marketing myself as a general business coach. There was always like that authenticity piece, because people would be like, I want to make this kind of business and run my business in this way. And then after, like, even before I had any certifications, just that is part of, especially with my in human design, my open identity center, where I'm like, I'm steering you towards your true identity. Just being around me and just the conversations we would have, like, it would be that they actually don't want to make that type of business that they originally said that they wanted to make. Or on the life side, like, do what career or anything that they want to do, that they say that they want to do. It's just what they like think. It's what they think that they have to do, or what they've been told they have to do. And then if we pursued that initial business, often then they would have trouble following through, like posting. Once it would be time to like post about their offer or something, they would have trouble, and they would think that it was like energy or time or something like that, but it's lack of alignment. And then so that's why oftentimes, and so that's why I now start off my containers, one-on-one containers, with and this is what the whole BB Bravery Being Yourself container is, but with subconscious work to bring like that true version of you out, so that we don't, most people, because most of those clients would like, we'd build stuff and then they'd struggle, and then we'd scrap that but use the information and insights from what we were building before, but to actually build what they really wanted to do. And then they still had the tools to end up actually building it. And so everybody who went through my containers ended up doing something completely different than they ever thought, but that was way more aligned. And that even just as a business coach in the traditional space for a while, I was like, oh, I feel like I don't have these big monetary wins that other coaches are talking about for their clients. Because they, maybe some of those people that I was watching, like, yeah, those coaches like taught them like, okay, here's how to make money. And then oftentimes like those clients, like we see like those clients of those coaches like would have all that success and then like burn out and like don't post for a couple months. And then they're like, all right, I'm switching directions. So it was kind of like faster on my end.
To just like get aligned at the beginning rather than to be like, okay, let's build this thing you want to build. I think that's, and like you say, you do get to take the sort of nuggets that you gained. Like I'm feeling a pivot in my business lately where it's like, okay, I'm incredible at digital marketing at this point. But I'm learning that I am kind of tired of doing it for other people. Like there's only one aspect I actually want to do for other people. So I'm like taking all the rest of my offers off and just saying like, I do technical SEO because that's the only thing that I can do without feeling drained afterwards. And then I'm gonna use all my digital marketing powers to sell my poetry and my art and stuff like that. But it's like, if I hadn't done digital marketing campaigns for a whole bunch of coaches and artists and all of these people, I wouldn't have learned how to do it myself. But I think something I've had to accept is that I will always have seasons of my life where I'm interested in certain types of work, and accepting and communicating that I'm not going to do certain types of work anymore is scary and hard because everyone's like, don't change your niche. That whole thing, which it's like, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that.
No, right.
As we go,
Yeah. Embracing. Well, you're a Manny Gen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally like what you're supposed to do. And I think that's true. That's true for everyone to an extent. And there are some people who will like have longer seasons, but I think everybody has seasons. Yeah, just kind of embracing that, because even if, I think like, I think I zoom out very quickly, but basically thinking of like like the generation that like stayed in a job for 40 years, like, but we're seeing how they treat other people around them and how deeply emotionally unhappy they are. And they don't think that that's a correlation. So I think as a society, we're definitely and then the generation after that, like, would stay in jobs for like 5 to 10 years at a time. And it's just we're just more and more embracing. And then when it comes to business, even people who are known for like one thing, I think, we've just been seeing like online business people enough. It's been around long enough where we see pretty much everyone has had some sort of pivot. And maybe we'll eventually get to where it doesn't have to be like, okay, like I've kind of just stopped doing that because I'm like, it's something different every couple of weeks, and this is why you're here.
Right. I think agility is actually a core skill for surviving this kind of economy. Like, and following that, my friends always call it like vital energy. Where does the vital energy come from? What generates vital energy? And like for me, for a while, it was doing social media content for other people, and now it's not. And even when you and I met, it was doing transformational coaching for people around self-acceptance, and now it's not. And I think it is edgy and like a little vulnerable to just sort of like, wiggle around. But for me, I think I've found that if I'm energized about it, people are excited to pay me for it. And people generally like my energy. So it's just, they're like, well, if they happen to have that problem at that time, it's the right time for us to work together.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Cause like, right. That's the thing. with like the capitalism that we have to like pay into, financial stability, like we've seen it as like, oh, coming from like one source. But and maybe that's also why like the passive income conversation in a way was so big, because it like kind of allows you to, it would seem like a way to allow people to be always changing but always have something. But like I think again, it takes a lot of like self trust and confidence, but like if you just keep following what excites you, people will pay you for it. Yeah, I've seen that time and time again. And that's like, that really helped me separate from a lot of like the marketing stuff that I learned for coaching. Was like, yes, like the two things that I hear when why people invested in me when it came to, well, which is any type of coaching, is that I like you and what you share and following your journey. That's, and everything else of like qualifications or like the transformation of a product. That the transformation is like, definitely why people like of a course is, or something is like why people get in at is a certain time. Again, is that matching that need. But the main thing is that everything else is like determining if that's the way that they're going to work with you.
Yeah. And I mean, how long have you and I been talking, like 3 or 4 years? And this is the first time that I've been in like a paid container with you. And that's happened with a handful of other people who I've been, like Ray Dohar. I don't know if you know them. Been following them for years. And then I met them in Mexico last year for the first time, in a container. And it was great. I loved it. It was just the right time and the right offer. And I think, we were getting back to that like strong arming thing when sales. It's like, if I don't get you to put down a deposit on this call, then you're going to be gone forever. It's like, what if we actually built a relationship built on mutual respect? And when the time was right, we spent some time together. Like those are the only, if anybody, if you had like high pressured me in some way, I probably would have been like, but now, in an organic way, we get to work together.
Yeah. I've also seen that happen again and again. Yeah, where it's gone against, it's gone against like, anything that I've learned, and also like the people that like you don't strong arm, remember, or it's both. If you do and if you don't, like, so if you do, then people are like, I'm not going to work with that person. And then if you don't, then they're going to most likely stay in your community and come around. Yeah. When it's the time.
Yeah, but yeah, like you say about having that faith, I always get this image of like an invisible bridge. And when you're an entrepreneur, like every time you're taking a step on that invisible bridge, and some days you forget you're even standing on an invisible bridge. The first couple times you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die, like the first couple weeks. But it's such a faith-based thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough. You're like really betting on yourself in a way that has no guarantees. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's a calling for some of us, and you just have to kind of do it. Or at least I do, speaking for myself.
I say, that too about business, and now also just like, really, as I'm like helping people move towards things that aren't even, that if they don't even have businesses, where it's having like an unshakable belief that it's going to work out. So if somebody wants to create something in their life or move through something and like feel a better feeling, that like just an unshakable belief that you're gonna get to that point. And because there are going to be things that test you and shake you along the way. And that definitely, that has, I feel like a year and a half ago, which was about am I like 2 years into my business? That's when that really, really, that unshakable belief like showed up for me. And it can be attributed to, and also just in life in general. And that like, I'm gonna figure it out. And also like life is like constantly, you're gonna be figuring it out the whole time.
It's all improv.
The goal just change. The goalpost just changes. And it can be attributed to definitely like being more authentic, and also like self-trust is something I talk about a lot, where every time that there's something that comes and shakes you, and you show up to that moment and do it, then you're like, and do the thing that it was that moment was asking you to do, then you're like, okay, I did it before, I can do it again. And also like, if you have moments after that you're like, I can't do it right now, like that's okay, because you did it before, you can do it again. We're human. And then also like healing work definitely has attributed to that. And then kind of like intentionally like burning stuff down to rebuild it again. And that was like, I was able to do that because I had that unshakable belief, but also doing that and then recovering in some way builds that unshakable belief even more.
Yeah, I've been having a lot of conversations lately about like the utility of losing everything. Like a friend of mine, a new friend that I met last night at an art night, talked about how their father had developed post-COVID psychosis. And so the person who they were closest with in the world, most dependent on, suddenly did not believe that that she was their daughter, and like thought that everything was fake. And they sort of like lost their rock in their life. And they talked about how now it's a lot harder to shake them than before, because before they thought they needed their dad for everything, and now they realize that they can do things on their own. And the word we came up with was, I was like, you're unfuckwithable. Like people can't fuck with you as much. And like, I've been houseless. I got abandoned mid-pregnancy and raised a child alone through a pandemic. Like, if you think that you can scare me with like a couple internet trolls, like, no, sorry. It's like, I'm just so like, I don't want to say like hardened, even though that's sort of accurate, because there's like a trauma element too. But like, there is, I think losing everything has helped me realize how much I don't actually need, multiple times. Not that I want to learn that lesson again, but it has been very helpful the times I did learn it. So I have some friends who are going into their Saturn return. We've talked about that a lot in our coaching container.
That's me.
Yeah. And I love them. And I'm like, it kind of feels fun to be, 2.5 years post, but it's like, it is a wonderful like shedding. I tried to present it to them like, you're leaving behind the parts of yourself that aren't serving you, so that you can become the person that is like going to bloom from that. And, it's like the Tower card and the Death card in tarot. There's, all these connotations, but it's not bad.
My favorite cards.
Yeah. It feels like bad news, but it's not. There is no creativity without entropy is something I think about a lot. Something must be destroyed to be created generally. But I'm going all over the place.
I deeply relate to that. Like in November, 2021, everything has been different since then, where I could have just like stayed and been fine in a relationship that I was in. And I thought that was a 5-year relationship, and I had been living with him for 3 years and moved to another state. Like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have moved to that state for any other reason. And did all of that and was like, okay. And like, when I thought about my future, I was like, good enough. And then eventually, and then was like, okay, no, I'm not. So that kind of blew everything up. And that was also when now the nodes, I mean, they still are there. The lunar nodes are switching this summer finally, but they have been in my second and eighth house, which is like, second is like personal finance, well, resources, and then eighth house is other people's stuff and debt. So even so, ever since I feel very much that way of like, everything has been just kind of like constantly unstable for the last year and a half, where I've ended that relationship and then moved states to a higher cost of living and then because also there was like just a couple months, even though I was the one that ended it, like, and I just like did not have emotional capacity to take on as many clients. And so a lot of my lessons have been like personal, but also like financial, and then also like I have a lot of people already in Boston, which is partly why I moved here, but I'm still starting fresh very much in a way, and like having a person that I did everything with I have a lot of intentional community here, but I'm still essentially alone going through life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it very much is like especially with Saturn going to Pisces, there's still, I'm still in for a journey, but like I feel just very prepared for anything.
Yeah, it's like an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I think I do romanticize a lot of the instability from my Saturn return, because I did learn so much, and I like a lot of scary stuff happened, I think, because I was open to anything. And part of my journey was learning to discern who can I trust and who can I not. And part of that was being overly trusting of some people during that period. Getting wrapped up in a cult. I need to do a whole episode about that at some point.
Yes. Wow,
destroying that cult when they tried to sex traffic me. Don't try to sex traffic me. I will break your cult.
Yes.
For anyone listening.
Cult.
So I'm going to start sort of the closing questions now, if you'd like. The first question is, what are you working on that you're excited about? It could be something you're learning, something you're building that you just sort of want to share.
Yeah, I am rebuilding my life. And also rebuilding in terms of my business. I'm rebuilding that kind of, well, I say that, but like I have the vision and I've already been like kind of acting on it. Like for example, the course that you're in, like my business partner and we run it live, and we have, I'm not going to spill all the beans, but we have visions for it. And then I've done many live versions of a business coaching group, and like, I want to turn that into a membership. I am really stepping up my content game. And then also like I'm in this amazing, group container called Witch and Famous, which like is like step into your famous icon status, find like the words that feel good to describe, and like I'm like unapologetically just moving more into how I support people, like in just and like, so finding the words for that, and like especially with my Saturn return is in my sixth house, so like taking control of like my routine and health. When I said I was interviewing for those corporate things, it was partly like I filled up my time way too much and was burnt out, and then I kind of like felt like I could do nothing, and then so now I hopefully today will hear back from some like I want my gay barista era, like part-time like barista jobs to like build like my new life and schedule around. Like, and just doing that, and also I may help these places out with social media, because if they see my resume and they're like, and I'm like, yeah, I'll gladly. So like just that, and like just leaning more, and then leaning more into the mystical things that I do and coaching. And also, and also my physical space. and my physical space and my wardrobe, my style. Those are things I'm reinventing right now. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm
Lots
excited
of
to see
stuff.
that. I've started getting into trying to make my own clothes because I just don't find anything that is androgynous and bodacious enough for me. So I'm like making like lightning bug pants and stuff like that. So yeah, I hear you. It's fun to try to like realize that actual self image.
Yes.
I very much hope you get to have that gay barista era because that sounds phenomenal. And who knows who you'll meet. Um,
Exactly. That too.
Cross-pollination. So my next question for you is, if people want to know more about you, work with you, what is the best way for them to learn more and find you?
Yeah, so I am now just my name, and I KKI _ VERGAKES on Instagram and TikTok. And those are my main two. And you can, if you want to do coaching, short or long term, you can book a subconscious assessment. It's $33, and we do some hypnosis, and it's like a mini coaching session, and then we get into like what further coaching looks like. And you can also book an astrology or human design or blended session. And you can also buy my vault of subconscious hypnosis tracks. There's hypnosis tracks and EFT videos, and they're targeted towards not just business things, just general things. And that is, yeah, where you can find me and how you can work with me right now. In the next month, I don't have like a freebie right now, so I would love to, I'm hoping to put out a free hypnosis track of some sort in the next month. Yeah.
Very cool. I meant to tell you, inspired by you, I decided to pursue an EFT certification. So I'm in the beginning stages of that because I love EFT. I've benefited from it for 10 years. And I just, seeing how you're integrating like astrology and hypnosis into your coaching, I'm like, there's something there for me too. And I'm going to give myself permission to explore it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then sort of my final closing question for you is there anything that wants to come through? Is there anything you feel like you want to say in this space about professionalism, anti-professionalism, entrepreneurship? Like, is there anything you want to say in this container?
Yeah, this has been, a great conversation. You're doing very, very important work. I think if you feel like you want to, I feel like if you're feeling alone, like in terms of being, if you're feeling like alone by like professional spaces you're in, or anything like that, just the power of like other people, the power of like through having queer friends in college. That's how I realized that I was, and I'm going through this now with like other identities that like in terms of my queerness that are coming through, and like it was always having, there's like media and social media, but also like actually interacting, and oftentimes that like can show up as, and also witchiness identities too that are coming through, like it can show up as like imposter syndrome. That's how it like showed up for me, where I didn't come out just as like even like bisexual for a while, because I was like, well, my other friends, they are quote unquote more than me, which is absolutely now not true. That was just a lot of like repression, and same with like non-binary identities that are now coming forward and working through that. And then also being in the witch and famous space, being around people who have been doing mystical work for like years and years. There's a little bit of, if there's like that imposter syndrome, again, I think that's like going back to like the shadow, the like embodiment, like conversation that we were having. That's like because you really deeply identify and you're excited and like you want to do that. That's a lot of times what it is. So just the power of like surrounding yourself with other people.
Right. Who are on similar missions, or who, see the value in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Nikki. I am very much looking forward to seeing what happens with this episode, and I can't wait to see all the new things that you're working on. Thanks so much for being here. And I think with that, we'll close the episode, and I will let you know when the episode goes out.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation and just all that you're doing here.
Sick. Yes, we'll see. Well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. That was episode 6 of the Anti-Professional Podcast. I am your host, Chuck Copenspire, and I welcome you to visit www.identitypending.com to learn more about our alternative digital marketing services. And if you want my hot takes on sales and marketing stuff and the coaching industry, you can always find me at Magical Weirdo Chuck on pretty much every social platform. So have a great day, and bye.